Good evening, I'm Farhana Sheikh. These are top stories for tonight. Ukraine peace talks in Geneva end with no major breakthrough. And Iran claims progress in nuclear talks with the US. All that and more coming up on AWANI International. Peace talks between Ukraine and Russia in Geneva end abruptly after just 2 hours of discussions on Wednesday. Russia's chief negotiator, Vladimir Medinsky, describes the talks as difficult but conducted in a business-like manner. He also indicates that further negotiations are expected to take place soon.
The negotiations held under United States mediation concluded following 2 days of engagement. Medinsky said the first day involved lengthy meetings, while the second was limited to a short session before talks were brought to a close. Meanwhile, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky accused Moscow of deliberately slowing efforts to bring an end to the 4-year conflict. The meetings in Switzerland was facilitated by Washington, with US President Donald Trump urging Zelensky to take steps aimed at advancing progress towards a settlement.
The second round of indirect nuclear talks between Iran and the United States also concluded in Geneva, with new talks to be scheduled. According to Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, good progress has been made, with both sides agreeing on broad agreements and a set of guiding principles to move forward.
Araghchi said progress does not mean a deal is imminent, adding it will take time to narrow the differences, with both sides preparing draft texts for a third round of talks. In Washington, Vice President J.D. Vance told Fox News that talks were mixed, confirming contact will continue, but warning that U.S. red lines remain. He said the U.S. is actively trying to find a solution, whether it is through diplomatic options or otherwise, insisting Iran must not obtain a nuclear weapon. Iran earlier said it is ready to defend itself against any aggression. Just as the talks began in Geneva, Iranian media reported the temporary closure of parts of the Strait of Hormuz during military exercises conducted by the Revolutionary Guards. Iran has repeatedly threatened to close the waterway, a critical maritime route which roughly 1/5 of global oil supplies pass through.
That's the headline for tonight. We'll be right back after the break. Welcome back. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky accuses US President Donald Trump of placing unfair pressure on Kyiv to end a nearly 4-year war with Russia. In an interview with Asia, Zelensky says Washington appears to be publicly urging Ukraine rather than Moscow to make concessions.
Trump has recently suggested that it was up to Ukraine to take steps to ensure the talks in Switzerland are successful without mentioning Russia. Zelensky said this could reflect a negotiating tactic rather than a fixed policy position. Despite his concerns, Zelensky expressed appreciation for ongoing diplomatic efforts. He described his recent discussions with U.S. envoy Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner as respectful, adding that those conversations did not involve the same amount of pressure. Reaffirming his position, the Ukrainian leader said he would not agree to surrender territory beyond areas currently occupied by Russian forces. Any such concession, he warned, would be rejected by voters in a national referendum. Currently, Russia controls around 88% of the Donbas region and is seeking full control of the territory as part of any negotiated settlement.
The United States will resume domestic uranium enrichment operations, working partly with partners in France, according to Energy Secretary Chris Wright. The move is part of Washington's push to reduce decades of reliance on foreign energy after the US maintained only limited commercial enrichment capacity at home.
Speaking at an energy conference in Paris, Wright said energy independence remains a key goal of the Trump administration. Central to the plan is a partnership with French nuclear fuel group Orano, which received $900 million in US funding to help build a new enrichment facility in Tennessee. The decision comes as Washington continues to demand Iran to fully dismantle its own uranium enrichment program, a core red line in ongoing US Iran nuclear talks. The US has also sought to curb Iran's nuclear program by joining Israeli strikes on Iranian nuclear sites in June, despite the UN nuclear watchdog saying it found no evidence of a coordinated weapons program in Tehran.
The Kremlin says neither Russia nor China has conducted secret nuclear tests, echoing Beijing's denials of US accusations. Washington has alleged that China carried out a covert test in 2020, calling for a new arms control treaty that would include both China and Russia.
A senior State Department official on Tuesday said the US could resume testing to match what it described as opaque Chinese activity. US President Donald Trump has been pushing for a trilateral nuclear pact to replace the expired New START agreement, the last major arms control treaty between Russia and the United States. The treaty's expiry has raised fears of a faster global nuclear arms race, though some experts say such concerns may be overstated.
Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney unveils a sweeping multi-billion-dollar defense strategy designed to strengthen the country's armed forces and reduce reliance on the United States. Described as Canada's first comprehensive defense industrial plan, he says the strategy reflects what the government sees as a shifting global security environment. Carney said Canada could no longer depend solely on geography or long-standing US protection to guarantee its safety. The plan commits more than 500 billion Canadian dollars to national security over the coming years. Of that total, $180 billion will be allocated to military procurement, while $290 billion will be invested in defense and security infrastructure. Carney, who has been openly critical of US President Donald Trump, argued that changing global alliances require Canada to build a more self-reliant defense base. At the same time, he stressed that greater independence would not mean isolation. Ottawa has already joined the European Union's Security Action for Europe program and is exploring close defense partnerships in Asia, including with South Korea, as it seeks to broaden its strategic relationships. UN missions from 85 member states issue a joint statement condemning Israel's expanding control over the West Bank, describing the recent measures as unlawful and in violation of international law. The group calls for an immediate reversal of what it characterizes as unilateral actions and voices firm opposition to any form of annexation. The criticism follows decisions by Israel's security cabinet to tighten control over parts of the West Bank, currently administered by the Palestinian Authority under the Oslo Accords. The statement also rejected any steps aimed at altering the demographic composition or legal status of Palestinian territory occupied since 1967, including East Jerusalem. It warned that such actions would undermine the prospects for a negotiated settlement. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has urged Israel to reverse the policy, describing it as both destabilizing and unlawful. 500,000 Israelis live in settlements across the West Bank, alongside approximately 3 million Palestinians. The Trump administration unveils three major Japanese-backed investment projects worth a combined $36 billion, spanning Ohio, Texas, and Georgia. The announcement marks the first wave of funding under Japan's $550 billion pledge to the U.S. as part of a recent trade deal. The largest development will rise in Portsmouth, Ohio, with a $33 billion natural gas power plant, set to become the world's largest gas-fired facility. In Texas, Japanese investors will support the $2.1 billion Texas Gulf Link deepwater crude oil export terminal. Meanwhile, in Georgia, a $600 million synthetic industrial diamond plant will be established. Officials say the project will reduce reliance on Chinese imports while strengthening advanced manufacturing and semiconductor production. They said the investments will be financed using existing foreign currency reserves and will not disrupt foreign exchange markets. Tensions remain along the Cambodia-Thailand border despite a ceasefire agreed in December. Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Manet claims that Thai forces are still positioned inside Cambodian territory. He describes the situation as fragile and calls on Thailand to allow the Joint Boundary Commission to begin formal demarcation work. In an interview with Reuters, Hun Manet said that Thai troops were stationed beyond what Cambodia considers Thailand's claimed boundary line. Thailand has rejected accusations, insisting that its military deployments are intended to reduce tensions rather than occupy Cambodian land. The dispute follows the worst fighting in more than a decade in July, which displaced hundreds of thousands along the 817-kilometer border. Philippine Vice President Sara Duterte announces that she will run in the 2028 presidential election. The daughter of former President Rodrigo Duterte also criticizes President Ferdinand Marcos Jr., accusing his administration of corruption and economic mismanagement.
She apologized for supporting Marcos in the 2022 election, when the alliance helped return the Marcos family to power and pledged to devote her life to public service. Their relations hit rock bottom last year when Marcos allowed the International Criminal Court to arrest Sara's father, Rodrigo Duterte, on charges of crimes against humanity. Sara Duterte is already among the leading potential candidates in early opinion polls. Political analysts suggest that her presidency could alter the Philippines' foreign policy direction, shifting it away from the United States and closer to China, a reversal of Marcos's pro-Washington stance. Under the Constitution, Marcos is not permitted to seek a second term. Sara Duterte's declaration comes as she faces renewed impeachment complaints over alleged corruption and betrayal of public trust, proceedings she survived last year.
Hezbollah rejects the Lebanese government's decision to give the army at least 4 months to move forward with the second phase of a nationwide disarmament plan. Hezbollah Secretary General Sheikh Naim Qasim describes the focus on disarmament as a serious mistake that aligns with Israeli objectives.
In August 2025, the cabinet instructed the army to draft and begin implementing a plan to place all weapons under state control, mainly targeting Hezbollah after its 2024 war with Israel. Israel maintains that Hezbollah's disarmament is a security priority, insisting that any plan must be fully enforced, particularly in border areas. It argues that Hezbollah's military activity breaches international resolutions and says it will continue acting to prevent hostile forces from entrenching in Lebanon.
That concludes AWANI International for tonight. Stay with us as we track the strategies and power shifts shaping the new global order. For more updates, visit international.astroawani.com and follow us on social media. On behalf of AWANI International, wishing all our Muslim audience a blessed Ramadan. I'm Farhana Sheikh. Thank you for watching and good night.